Hello viewers, after many months of preparation, I would now be competing in my first ever NLS race at the Nurburgring Nordschliefe. The team and I were very excited ahead of the double header round. 2 6-hour races were ahead of us. Let's cut to Saturday morning. This was the qualifying session for NLS 6. We waited and watched as Misha went out first thing to set a lap time. Then suddenly, his car was smoking and had clearly been in a collision. We had no idea what had just happened. After watching the footage back on the live stream, it was quite tricky to work out exactly what was the cause of this spin. The incident was certainly a strange one, as the back end of the car went round very easily, I'm sure you'll agree. There's a bit of tension in the garage as we didn't know the full extent of the damage, and we didn't know if Misha was even okay. There was a real risk here that if the damage to the car was bad, that we wouldn't even be able to start the race. The car was being towed back to the garage, and once it got there, we'd be able to assess the full extent of the damage. Luckily, Misha was okay after the crash. As for the car, it had suffered significant damage on both the front and the rear. This was going to require some serious work from the Black Falcon team to get up and running once again, so we entrusted them to do the best they could with the limited time we had before the race start. Bilstein even sacrificed their 330i show car for parts to assist in making the repairs possible. All we could do really was hope for the best, but also to fulfill some media duties in the meantime. As ever, it's amazing to see the support for our team, and I just want to say a massive thank you guys to everyone that visited us over the whole weekend. A few hours later, back at the car, Black Falcon had worked a miracle, and somehow the car was transformed and ready to race. I honestly couldn't believe how quickly they'd turned this car around. It's as if nothing had happened. And so, after many stressful hours, the car was rolled out of the garage and onto the grid to proudly start our first ever NLS race. Jimmy would have the honour of starting the race, but it wasn't long before disaster would strike once again. After making up many positions through the first 3 corners, he was unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time through turn 4. Obviously there was a very heavy hit, and he was reporting that one of the tyres was rubbing against the bodywork, so he quite simply had to pit the car to assess the damage. The mechanics did their best to fix what they could, and he was sent on his way once again, albeit he was quite far back off of the pack at this point, and even got dropped into the GT3 battle, which was quite a hard place to be. So all Jimmy could really do here was do some nice consistent laps and try to reduce the gap to the cars in front. After 2 hours of driving, it was time for me to get ready for my first stint. Jimmy pulled in and I was ready to be sent out onto the track for my first ever stint. My primary objective was to continue bridging the gap towards the cars in front, and by this point we had a decent shout of getting a top 5. Eventually, I caught someone in our class for a direct battle on the track. It took a while to catch up to the back of them, and after doing so, I saw my opportunity and went for the move at Bergwerk. This stint was definitely a very special one, not only because it was my first one in an NLS race, but also because of the sunset, which made it a bit more magical. The next lap there was a fair amount of traffic to contend with, and I was slightly hesitant, which allowed him to get back past me. But at the end of the same lap I was able to return the favour after he somewhat got tangled up with this Aston Martin GT3 car. Later on in the stint, the battle with this guy resumed and I had to try to hold him off for the best part of an entire lap. Eventually he was able to pass and I couldn't quite maintain his pace, and so he began to pull away. This may have been down to tyre life at this point, but my main concern was simply to bring the car back in one piece. I didn't want to push too hard so that I was beginning to make mistakes. I just played it quite safe at this point. In typical fashion, we were in 6th place when my stint ended. I brought the car in and handed it over to Misha to bring it home. Now Misha did a really good job of keeping the car out of trouble in very difficult conditions. Obviously it was very dark at this point, as you can see, and without a rear view mirror, which fell off in the collision at the start of the race, it was extremely difficult to see faster traffic approaching from behind. And unfortunately, with 30 minutes left to go in the 6-hour race, we were involved in this incident. The car had to be retired, and sadly we would not finish our first NLS race. It was obviously quite painful to have to retire the car so close to the end of the race. The car would go back to the mechanics, and they were definitely working very hard this day to fix this car over and over again. All we could do was wait for tomorrow. We arrived back at the track the next day in good spirits. The car was fixed overnight and was ready to be shaken down in the morning qualifying session. Jimmy went out first thing to warm up the car, and it was quite clear that the car had taken a few knocks as the electronics were giving us some issues, as we mentioned. One such issue in the morning was that the car was randomly downshifting when we got on full throttle. As you can probably imagine, our qualifying session wasn't ideal. We were very compromised by these issues, and so just like the day before, where we actually had no qualifying time, on this occasion our time was quite slow, so we were qualifying at the back of the pack in our group of 10. Now before the race, just like the day before, I met up with many of you fans outside of our garage, and yeah, I mean, it's just an amazing thing to see this, the support for our team, for myself, and I got to say just a massive thank you to everyone who supported us and is supporting us and is watching this video. It was decided in an earlier meeting that I would be doing the race start, and this was something that I was seriously looking forward to. My first ever race start in the NLS, a very big occasion, and there was still some pressure. You know, this was a big occasion. The car had gone through a lot this weekend with lots of damage, and so I had to be quite careful to make sure that we got through quite cleanly. And here is the race start, guys. Starting towards the back of our group, we're in the second group overall. Now, I didn't get the best launch initially, as you can see there's a bit of a gap to the cars in front, but as we head towards the first corner, it's all going to choke up, as it usually does. Now, as I just mentioned, wanting to get through here without any damage, as the lead driver, or the first driver in the car in the race, you really just want to bring the car back home to your teammates without any damage, of course, especially after yesterday. So keeping on the inside here, I managed to just nip underneath of this guy who's actually in our class, and we'd actually end up battling this guy throughout the entirety of my stint. So again, quite close, pinches up through the apex of turn 3, through the right hander of turn 4, trying to avoid any Porsches which might be spinning, and we are away just fine. So it looked like we gained a couple of positions there into the sprint hairpin, some dust being kicked up into the air. Now here I noticed, this was the first time I noticed it, that our car just was slightly down on power. You see the cars in front just pull away by 10-20 meters on the exit there, and it felt like our car was overheating. It was a very hot day and the car was just suffering from the heat, and so I would have to contend with this distinct lack of power. At the end of the lap, you can see here just keeping up with one of the cars in our class and also one of the Scirocco's. So we're kind of in a big race together. We're not necessarily in contention for the same positions here. So as we go past this Scirocco, it's not necessarily for position in class, it's in a different class, but you still have to directly race against these guys. So those Scirocco's, for example, are slightly more powerful, have slightly better speed, especially on the GP, and so you do have to try and contend with that. Now into first corner, second lap, looking at a possible overtake here against someone in our class in the 330i there, but it didn't quite happen. And again, on the exit of the sprint hairpin, you can see here the power just really wasn't there for me, and I was doing my best, but the Scirocco was able to get back around my outside and retake that position. Now I spoke to my team about this. I was on the radio and they basically advised that just stay out of the slipstream as much as you possibly can. This Porsche went back through, so it was a bit of a topsy-turvy race going back and forth past other cars, and so I kind of just left a bit of a gap, as you can see, and just tried to drive on my own for a bit just to cool the car down. But I couldn't help but get back into this battle at the end of the lap. As you can see, quite a few cars here getting caught up with each other. So back past that Scirocco once again, past another Scirocco here. And so our car was really good on the straight, actually, had really good top speed. This was my pit stop halfway through my stint before getting waved back out onto the track once again. So in the 6-hour race we were doing 2-hour stints each. So this is 1 hour in now, coming back out onto the track for the second half of the stint. It was a very hot race, I must say, very sweaty in the car, even with the AC on, which actually probably wasn't helping our speed. Now through here, you can see catching up to some slower class cars and just being quite committed on the brakes, making sure that you assert your position quite early and just not lose any time by waiting behind. Now, this was an overtake for position in class, I believe. So catching up with another 330i, and this is towards the foxhole. So there were times where you kind of had to be right behind another car. There's not much I could do about it, but ideally I'll try and get the overtake done as swiftly as possible. So down through the foxhole, compression at the bottom, back up the other side, just looking for this move. And this guy was actually just get out of the way, actually completely move to the left and make it very easy, so that was no issue at all. And next position was this guy, the guy we overtook on the first lap at turn 2, and this was a good sign. Jimmy did a really good job to bring us back into contention with the other cars, because obviously the pit stop at the beginning put us really far back, and now I was able to reap the benefits of that by going for some moves. This was a good overtake here on the Dottinger. I knew I just had to get within slipstream range before this straight, and I did that, and you can see the benefit. Easily going by in the slipstream, car's top speed was good, so we flew by into another position. Here having a massive moment on this curb, just taking a bit too much of it at speed. You're going through there pretty quickly. Luckily we managed to gather it up and continue on our way. This was the next lap, and as you can see, not the car directly in front, the one in front of that is a battle for class. So I had a direct reference and someone to chase to try to go for the top 5. So let's run through the hats and back section of the track as we try to put a lap together to try to reduce the gap to that car in front. It's really about maintaining speed through here, opening up this left-hander, running the curb, the Bilstein suspension working nicely through there, back on the power through the left to keep that minimum speed up, and then to this right-hander, quite a crucial one because it does lead out onto a flat-out section. And so that was quite a decent sector of the track. And then still getting out of the way of the traffic, so being mindful that whilst I am, yes, trying to catch up with the car in front, I still have to be looking in the mirrors and trying to catch up with these, trying to get out of the way of the cars in in the higher classes, such as this Porsche that goes through. So the Cup cars normally in very close contention. You might have noticed that on Jimmy's clip earlier, as the GT3s and the Cup cars do tend to come around in quite close formation, so it's quite hard to get out of their way. But here I was sizing up another opportunity. Now earlier in the race I did go for a move into bergwork, which we're just coming up to. I think behind this car I'm probably not quite close enough on this occasion, and so we're going to have to wait until a little bit later in the lap. Now through the Niki Lauda curve, this left-hander, easily flat out in this car. On the brakes quite late, you can see just how much we gain on the brakes there. And then back onto the power. This is a crucial section because it's all uphill, it's all flat out, and we could potentially get this move done. So I had the speed, I had a good exit out of bergwork, and so I thought, well, you know what, I'm not going to be able to get the move done here. I'm going to have to back off slightly. You might have just heard that I just lifted off the power. I'm going to have to time my momentum so that I get the slipstream dead right and I move into the gap at the right moment. And I decided that moment was now. As we get onto the power once again, keeping it in 5th gear, then into 6th. I'm going to move to the left. It's kind of blocking me, but I just sense exactly a car width. We're going to move up the inside. I'm not going to back out, and we get the move done. A very ropey move, but full commitment, and we got it done. So after 2 hours of driving, I was called into the pit lane to bring my first ever stint in the NLS to a close. So you can see here powering into the pit lane, then braking at the last moment to get down to the 60 kilometers per hour mark. And that happens to be 3rd gear at 3000 RPM, and then you're exactly on 60. That's quite an easy way of marking that. So into the pit box we go, stopping as close as we can to minimize the time loss. And that was that. I was happy with my performance, getting us from the back of the pack to the mid pack with no incidents to report of. It was now the turn of Jimmy to put in a solid stint. As ever, please do check out Jimmy's and Misha's channels for more footage of their stints. A basic summary would be that Jimmy put in a mega stint. It's quite clear. He was very committed, consistent, fast, good overtakes, and he put us in a very solid position within the top 5. It was then the turn of Misha to bring it home for us. Now, there was a lot of pressure on Misha. Obviously, he had some collisions the day before, and he really did want to just bring this home and do the best for the team. And despite having some technical issues during his stint, he was able to bring the car home for our first finish in the NLS. It was such an incredible moment after the heartache of not finishing the day before, and after all of the setbacks we had over the weekend. I have to say a massive thank you to Bilstein for making this possible, Black Falcon for their incredible work on the car over the weekend, all of our fans for showing support, and all of you for watching this video. Thank you very much guys, I will catch you next time. Goodbye.